I think I need to thank everybody that's helped put this together, the film department for coming and recording, Neil for hooking us up with the awesome pizza, and everybody doing signs, Greg, and everybody else that's helped one way or another to put this together, and especially our our guest speakers. Thank you for coming and sharing with us. It's great to have you. So we're gonna have Brooke Smart go first. Brooke Smart is an illustrator and mural artist. She loves telling stories in her work and enjoys creating with many different mediums. Her work can be found in the pages of books, on the walls of big buildings, and sometimes it appears as large scale installations. Her clients include Random House, Penguin, Viking, Greystone Kids, Mindy Kaling, the New York Times, PBS, and Eccles Theater. Here's Brooke.
Thank you for having me. I am local here to Utah. I live in South Jordan, and my husband actually just started teaching at Salt Lake Community College. He's an architect, so it's so fun to be here. And yeah, seems like a very amazing program that you have, and amazing pizza that you get at events. So that's a bonus. Um, so the best way for me to kind of talk about my journey as an artist, and then also some things that I've learned is to kind of show you some of my work and kind of how I got to where and what I'm doing today. So I did not start out as an illustrator. I started out really wanting to be a fine artist, and I went to school. I went to BYU for illustration, and I was doing the math, and it's like 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, I thought I really love to draw. I really love to paint. And I've always loved to draw and paint people. And at BYU, I joined the illustration department because there was a big emphasis on learning how to draw. And so I took just tons and tons of figure drawing classes and head painting and figure painting. And this was the direction I wanted to go. So this is some of my work from back then, and I love to paint with oils. Um, but it is not at all what my work looks like now. But it's something that I still really enjoy, and I am proud of the work and then the lessons that I learned from doing this type of work. And I sold paintings through a gallery for a little while after college, and I did portrait commissions, and that was kind of where I wanted to go with my work. And then I had this child. I got married right out of after college, and then we ended up going and living in the Midwest. My ex-husband now went to grad school in the Midwest, and then I had this baby, and ended up getting divorced when she was just 1 year old. And so I kind of had to make some decisions at that point. I was selling work, but it wasn't super consistent. Also, I am the world's slowest oil painter. I really struggle with getting skin tones right when it's not daylight hours. And with a 1 year old, if any of you have a 1 year old, it is really hard to have a lot of daylight hours and also like be a parent at the same time, daylight hours to paint. So it was kind of it was a big transition time in my life, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Um, I moved here. I've moved back here from Minnesota where we were living, and so I was kind of her one consistent parent. But I still wanted to, be able to support us through my art. And so after a lot of contemplation, a lot of time talking to my therapist, it occurred to me that, I could go back to my training as an illustrator. I could change mediums, and I could still kind of stay home with her. So these were things that were important to me. So I did. I totally had to change my style, had to change mediums because I needed to be able to come and go, nap time or whenever I had time. Often all night I would be painting. Um, So this is, yeah, kind of the beginnings of me as an illustrator, not that amazing drawing that she's doing, copying my drawing, but that was me on the right. So I started kind of taking initiative and, trying to figure out how to be an illustrator because yes, I had been taught for 4 years at BYU how to be an illustrator, but in my head, I'm like, I don't need to know any of this because I'm never going to be an illustrator. So I started to get some illustration work, and I took some. This was from a Matt's class, Make Art That Sells, that are just really incredible illustration classes online that you can take. And this was one about picture books because I had started thinking, well, one of the things that I really love to buy the most and one of the things I use the most as a mother are picture books. And so I thought, maybe that's the right path for me. So I think maybe Jake will be talking about long projects too, but I had this, so I had just gotten an agent to start selling my work as an illustrator. And she said, you don't really have a lot of black and white images in your portfolio. And I had told her I wanted to, maybe do some middle grade novels, which you have to paint, draw a lot of black and white. And so I went to lunch with some other creative friends, which, after school, you kind of think, oh no, I'm like on my own and I don't have the art studio at school. I don't have all of these people around me that are artists to bounce ideas off of. But I had these great friends. One of them is my cousin, Megan Trueblood, who does like more realistic work. But we went out to lunch. We all decided to do this 100-day project. And I thought, okay, this is a good idea for me because I can get some black and white images in my portfolio. And also I can kind of illustrate this time in my life with my daughter because I know maybe it won't last forever, that it's going to be me and her. And as hard as it was also really just such a special time in our life, just the two of us. So I decided to do 100 just little moments in our life together. And so here, how many? 12. So it was just such a fun kind of a challenge. And I hadn't really started getting a ton of illustration work, so I was still kind of figuring out my style and what I wanted to do, and to have like a square, for Instagram, and then black and white, 2 figures, minimal background. It was kind of a challenge to do 100 of these. It's a lot of drawing, it's a lot of painting, and every single day figuring that out. And usually at the end of the day after I put her to bed, that's when I would figure it out. And in my head, I thought, oh, I could just whip these out so fast. But for me, it would sometimes go pretty late into the night. So after about 10 of them, I thought, I can't do this. This is like so hard. But this was back when Instagram was just much better and people would see your work. And I started to get followers and I started to get, more attention on my work. And it was actually doing just what I wanted it to do. But then it also took this different level too, where I was getting comments from mostly like mothers around the world saying, oh, this is me and my child. And I just thought like, this is such a visual journey, like a visual record of me and my daughter specifically. But then I realized it was actually like a universal story that I was telling. And so it just like make me cry every day to read these comments. But it kept me going. I did 100. And then these are all, they wanted them at the Springville Museum. It was part of a show years ago. But what this taught me, I made it into a book. What this taught me though, because this was me figuring out how to be an illustrator, how to go from a fine artist to a totally different mindset as an illustrator. And I realized like doing 100 paintings, 100 drawings, 100 different ideas, from 1 to 100, you grow so much. So this was actually such a great exercise for me to really just help me develop my style. This is the very first one I did. It's kind of like wonky and not great. I don't know, hands are kind of weirdly small. I don't know. And then that's the last one I did. And I really feel like I kind of honed my style. I figured out what I was doing. My lines are cleaner. The composition is stronger. So that was something that was really kind of enlightening to me. Oh, like this 10,000 hours thing is not a joke. It's putting the time in will make you a stronger artist. And then also for me, because it was something that was really interesting to me, me and my daughter's relationship, I put the time into it and I made it something that was important and special. And because of that, people noticed my work and then started giving me work that was similar. So I think that's like such a big lesson to learn as an artist. As an illustrator, I do all kinds of work for all kinds of clients, but if I can make it interesting to me, then the work will be stronger. And then if the work is stronger, then I'll get more work that's like it. And then eventually you start getting work that's all pretty interesting to you. So yeah, 5 years ago, this happened. That's my daughter that I drew on the left. Um, and then I started drawing them too, of course. um, my husband's actually really fun to draw because of that beard and glasses. So he shows up in a lot of my work because he's just actually a really fun character. And he's the most humble person in the world and would never ask to be drawn ever. So these are some books that came directly from that project. They, looked and thought, okay, this person is really interested in family-parent relationships. And so this first series, it's with Penguin, and it's an imprint that they have that really focuses on showing children themselves in books, because a lot of the books that I grew up with have a mom and a dad and they're white and they have 3 kids or whatever, which yes, I do realize it is my family, but but these books are really special to me and it was a project I was really excited about because it does show all kinds of families. And my favorite thing is to get these letters from families where they say, like, we've just cried because we saw ourselves in this book. And we don't often see, a book that has a family that looks like ours. So that's been really cool. And the author, Dan Sachs, he has a children's podcast called Noodle Loaf, and he has a music background. He used to be like a rock star that traveled all over the world, but he has this children's podcast that has a lot of his music in it, and it's really great. But the books are based on some of his songs. And this was my first book project that I got, and so the publisher reached out and they're like, we're really interested in Brooke Smart, but we don't know if she can make a book. So I had one weekend, they gave me the text and told me to do a little sample spread. And I don't have to do this very much, but, coming from someone that didn't know how a book was made or like how to get a job, thought this might be interesting. So this is what I came up with for that weekend. And then this is what we simplified it to. The grandma's a little ghosty, just in white there. But so yeah, board books especially, sometimes it's about kind of simplicity in telling that story. So these are some more images from that first book. And it follows different families. This was fun for me because I had been a single mom for 6 years. But yeah, these books are very special to me because they're, something that I'm interested in, which is kind of telling like family relationships and all kinds of families. But then also, it was, fun to figure out how to make a book and have them come out. This is from, I think, the second book, and this is actually the author and his family. So sometimes as an illustrator, I mean, that's something that's cool about being a creative. You can kind of put yourself or, your own Easter eggs into your projects. Nobody would know except Dan. But luckily they were happy with that. So these, let's see. Yeah, these are from that same series. This is a book about how different babies come into families. And I got one of my favorite reviews online. I think it was an Amazon review. I don't know. I don't usually read them anymore. But this one was funny because this woman was like, I bought this book and it shows things like adoption, foster care, and surrogacy, and like, how could you tell these things? And I'm like, it's like, I'm sending this book back. Children don't need to know about this. And I'm like, well, they do actually, because that's a pretty normal way to make a family. And like, isn't that great to teach them that there are different ways to make a family? But it kind of made me laugh. So it's like, I don't really want you to have my book. I don't, That's okay. You're not the person I'm trying to touch. Um, yeah, that was my niece with all of those. These are my favorite pictures. Sometimes people send me these pictures with like their children that actually love these books. I have a niece who has a little boy, and her little boy, their book is just totally, the purple one is just totally torn apart because he just loves it so much, and that's just absolutely my favorite thing. It makes all of those hours and weeks and months worth it. So we did a second series too with Dan, and these are about different communities that we live in. Oh, and this one was fun too, because again, like I could kind of put what I wanted to into it, but that little girl at the top right is my niece, and then these drawings are actually her drawings. So she was like 3 at the time, and I was like, "Is it okay, Kit, if I put your drawings into my book?" She could not figure out what I was talking about. But then when the book came out, I dedicated it to her, and yeah, took it to her preschool class, and then I confused all of her preschool friends, like, "How is Kit in this book? And those are her drawings. How did they make it?" It's very confusing, but exciting. But it just made the art like a lot more authentic, and that was really fun. Um, this was a book called We Share This Earth, and shows different um, families, different communities around the world. And now I need to visit Turkey and all of these different places that I got to research. And again, this one actually, quite cute in the red. She is the author's daughter in an actual, she went to, why can't I think of this holiday? In Rio de Janeiro. Carnival. Yeah, she was actually in Carnival, and like that was her outfit she wore. And it was interesting because while I was working on the book, they posted these pictures, and I was like, Dan, can I use this actual costume? So that was kind of cool. But yeah, these projects have led to other projects that have been really exciting for me. And this is my most recent book called This Table. And it's about, like, the main character is this table. And it's about how a seed became like how a seed became a tree, how the tree became a table, and then how life grew up around that table. So that was actually an interesting project to try and figure out how to make the table the main character, and how to make all of the other characters, like, they're part of the scene, they're part of the story, but it's not about them so much as like the environment that the table created for them. So the table is in every spread in the center. So I've like moved it around a little bit, perspective wise, but that was that was the solution we came to. And this, I mean, just so you know, like, you get these books and you think, "Well, this is a cute book, whatever." But books take this usually about a year. Well, unless you're Jake Parker and you can draw really, really fast. Um, but this one, I got the contract in 2020, and so it got pushed back, and then they kept changing the text, changing all these things. So it finally came out this year after 4 years of kind of working on it, kind of like it's just been kind of a long journey. So it's cool when it actually comes out. And I redrew this book, I think the whole book 4 times, because it was such a creative text that we could go so many different directions. But I had just such an amazing art director who's also an illustrator, Sarah Gillingham. And it's nice to work with someone that understands, and like, we can make this better though. And some art directors are super great, some are a little harder to work with, but this one I think it is my favorite book that I worked on because of the direction, and because she, had confidence in me, but then made me do the work to make it better and stronger. And this one also includes my cat in all of the spreads. So that's kind of fun. Our cat always does that, like sits on a chair and like peeks over the edge, hoping that you'll leave that cereal for a minute so she can like run up real fast and drink all the milk. But that's pretty fun for kids. And that's something like, as a child growing up reading Goodnight Moon and looking for that mouse, that was a really fun thing to do for kids to make it a really more engaging book. And then, hopefully they're looking at the rest of it, but they're looking for the cat and they're looking for a bird. And then like surprising work comes from this. So again, maybe talking about like personal projects. When you get going as a professional, then you don't have as much time to do personal work. But because I did that 100-day project, that personal project, like I got to design Mindy Kaling's Christmas card a couple years ago, and I'm designing some like stationery for her. She could just say, "Hey, Brooke, do you want to come and like sweep my porch?" And I'd be like, "Okay." But that was really like such a surprising, but I think this is in 2020, so I was really depressed. And then she's like, "Do you want to design my Christmas card?" And I'm like, "Everything's fine now." um, yeah. So families is kind of something that's very important to me. And then also, going through a divorce, it's terrible. It's awful. But it taught me a lot about myself, and it taught me a lot about what's important to me. And um, brave women teaching my daughter that you can like go through hard things and you can be a strong person and you can come out the other end a better human. That's really important to me. And so I started to get these projects about um, brave women from history. And history is something else too that I'm um, very passionate about. I've always just loved to read and I love history. I got to do a lot with this magazine, Bravery magazine, that focused a lot on each issue was a different woman from history, and then they would dive into their story. So their very first one was about Jane Goodall. And then this project, because I was so excited about it, got me lots of other projects. So this was one with women in architecture in Salt Lake. They asked me to illustrate some cool women architects, and my husband's an architect, so that was really fun. But now, whenever I travel, I'm like, oh, that's a Zaha Hadid, like now I know because I've done all this research. But yeah, so again, like getting projects that I'm interested in because of work that I've done. This is one of the biggest projects I've done, and this is actually really cool because I painted. This was with Better Days 2020, which is a nonprofit in Utah, and they were all about. Well, I know the name is kind of ironic, Better Days 2020. We were celebrating a lot in 2020, but then it ended up falling apart a little bit. But it was a project about telling the stories of women from Utah to educate like our children and educate ourselves, because we hear about, all of these men from Utah, but they created a whole curriculum for 4th and 7th grades. When you're learning about Utah, you're going to learn about these awesome women from Utah. And so I painted 50 of these. They're made into trading cards. They're in a book. And then these originals actually are on a traveling show. It was supposed to just travel for 2 years, but it's actually still traveling. And the very first place that I went was here in this building. Did you come to that? Yeah. So that was actually like so cool, because this building is where we invited a lot of the families of these women. They've all passed away, but some family members that we worked with for each of these illustrations, we invited all of them, and it was just down the hall. So that's whenever I drive past this building, I think of that, because that was a really cool night. And it was cool. We worked with a lot of the tribes in Utah and had them choose a woman to kind of represent their tribe. So that was great because we wanted to tell so many different stories. We hear about suffragists from Utah. We hear about, Martha Hughes Cannon. She's one of the no. Well, Emmeline B. Wells is our most famous suffragist, but Martha Hughes Cannon was one of these cards that I painted, and she was the first female state senator in all of the United States, and she was in Utah, so that's pretty cool. And she ran against her husband, and she won, so that's really cool. But like I didn't know any of this, so that's something that has been kind of like a fringe benefit of becoming an illustrator. I have all of this amazing knowledge now, and I have all of these heroes that I got to paint, and I got to do this research on. And I've done some more work with Better Days to kind of celebrate the Wasatch Mountains with women. But they also got me these book projects. So again, kind of like one bleeding into another. You never know where one project will lead. And this was about Dorothy Lucas, who was a WASP pilot. And she actually, when this book came out, she was She turned 100 like right after it came out, and she was the last living wasp in the United States, the last one alive, and she got to hold her book, the book about her. So I thought that was really, really cool. I should have put that picture in here. I have a cool picture of her holding it. I really wanted to meet her, but she was, 100 and not super well. But I thought that was really cool that we ended up like giving that to her before she died. Um, so as an illustrator, I do a lot of books and I do a lot of different things. But it's nice sometimes to have kind of repeat clients, and I've done a ton for the Friend over the year, and they give me these cool projects because they know I like history. So this is Martha Hughes Cannon. Before she became the state senator, she was a doctor, and she was what's the word? But typesetter, yes. That was when she was just like 14. Done some covers. They gave me this one year. I did different people in church history, and they made these little cards that you could cut out and like fold them, and church history heroes. I think only my daughter probably did it, but yeah, coming back to personal work. So for me, I am kind of slammed most of the time with client work, and I think whenever I have the chance to like draw on my sketchbook or do personal work, my other work gets so much stronger because I remember how fun it is to be an artist. Sometimes with client work, you're like, oh, I just have to get this done, and it's 4 a.m. and do I even like being an artist? I don't know. Maybe I should be an accountant. I don't know. But whenever I am able to do personal work, then I remind myself that, oh, this is actually something that I just really, really love. And then that brings kind of that joy back into the work that I'm doing. And I think that's one of the questions I get the most as an illustrator. Like, how do you get through burnout, and how do you like push through for your deadlines? And it is a lot of like convincing yourself again and again, like, this is something that I love. Would I love to go, pick up garbage every day? Maybe I would. Sometimes I look at the postal workers and I'm like, looks nice, wearing shorts, walking around. But I don't know. Like for me, it's always been a part of me. Being an artist is really just such an important part of who I am. And when I'm not creating, then I feel like I'm kind of empty. But doing this personal work does remind me how much I love it. And then again, like makes the work stronger. But also mental, physical health is super important. And it has taken me many years to realize, ooh, fresh air is a good idea. And I actually like running outside. So whenever I am stuck, actually, I will go on a run. And then that kind of clears the brain a little bit, gets some oxygen in there. Some different work that I've done. So for me, doing personal work, sometimes it's me signing up to be in a show. And then I'm like, oh, I can make anything I want. And I'm in a show, so I have a deadline. So that's good. I used to do this show, the 300 Plates show in Salt Lake. That's really fun. And I would do it because I really wanted to paint with acrylic. And I didn't often paint with acrylic. And you had to paint on these boards, these plates. And so that was kind of a fun challenge for me. And then I'd be like, should I switch to acrylic? And then sometimes I do. I don't know. But yeah, switching up your medium, switching up your project definitely informs your other work when you come back to it. And then, yeah, like Robinson said, about 5 years ago, I started doing some murals. And some of these are actually just right down the road. This one is. It's on 9th South, 2nd East. This is my very first mural, and I learned a lot. But it's all about women helping women, which was a theme that I was very interested in. And the woman who owns the Maven District, this particular block, it's all women-owned businesses. So that was really cool. And then she said, I want something with women helping women. And so that was kind of a fun visual to figure out. And then this is another one I've done for her on Maven West, which is 9th South and 4th West, maybe. And this is another one. Thought I would show these because they're kind of close by. But this one is, it's on Edison and 9th South. And this one was about facing fear, and I had to figure out how to use spray paint. So with each mural, I think it's really good because every single mural, I love doing public art because I always learn so much. Every wall is different. Every client is different. It's always a new challenge. Like now I can drive a scissor lift and a boom lift, and I I guess I can spray paint now. This is on perforated steel, so I had to mask it all and then spray it. So I couldn't just like stick with my brush and my roller. But it was a good challenge, and even though it's kind of a simple design, it was definitely one of my hardest murals. And then also I've been trying to, I don't know, as an artist, you just always are trying to grow. And for me, like growing involves trying different things and like keeping it interesting for me. And this was a mural that I did for Delvey's Plastic. And if you've been to Delvey's, they sell like the acrylic plastic, and they laser cut all these glasses out for me. And then we drilled into the concrete and installed these glasses over their faces. And they kind of glow. So that was a new medium that I was like, well, now I have to use acrylic a lot more because it's really fun. And when people come and see this mural, they're like, how does it glow? Is it plugged in? And I'm like, no, it just glows. I don't know. Must be some scientific answer to that. But there's some other murals at the Gateway. And again, learning so much, like this client, Recursion, their branding is the full spectrum of the rainbow, which I don't usually use that many colors in a mural, but it was a good challenge. And this is one I just finished in Indiana. And this is the view from an elementary school window. This kindergarten class asked to have a mural. They wrote letters to their local government, and then it was part of a mural fest. This is not the finished one because I didn't take pictures. But they had this ugly water building. So I thought that one was really interesting too, because it taught the kids, like, if you try and you want something to happen, like it is possible. And so I had this huge fan club painting this one, which was really fun. Usually murals, I'm like in a construction site or in, on some street, but I had all of the kids from the elementary school at their playground every day, like, Mrs. Smart, like waving at me. And I just felt like, yes, I'm here and I'm very important. But it was really fun because I had to get it done in 2 weeks, which was kind of tough. And then again, like you say, oh, okay, I want to do murals, but maybe like I have a friend who does murals, but she's terrified of heights. So maybe like a vinyl mural is something that's a little bit more approachable. There are all kinds of ways to make public art. And for this was for a school in it's Polk Elementary in Ogden that actually my husband designed the school, and then I got to do the murals, which was really cool. Sometimes our jobs collide. And there's some garbage trucks driving around Salt Lake. I think this area, actually. Do you see this one? It's designed by me. That's fun. My friends will like chase down the garbage trucks and take pictures for me. But that's something like my student brain would have never thought like, oh, I could make work for a garbage truck. So I think what I've learned the most as an illustrator, this is on like printed on tile. What I've learned most as an illustrator is to be really open-minded and maybe do things that are really scary. And once you approach them, once you conquer them, then you think, okay, well, I can do something even harder. I can like take this a different direction. If you've been to the Grand America at their holiday windows, I designed all of them last year. So these are like my designs for the windows. And then I do not have great pictures here, but there's one of my designs. And then there's kind of a close-up of part of it that they made more three-dimensional. So it's this whole team of women actually that put them together every year. And so I designed all of them. Some of the elements they would make totally three-dimensional. And some of them they would print out my designs and then kind of embellish. But a project I've been to the Grand many, many years looking at those windows. And then I just reached out to the person who's in charge and then realized, oh, like she's like someone I kind of know. And then she has some of my work. She has a couple of my books. So it actually worked out really well. So I think just being super brave, reaching out to people that are scary. Art directors are just people. The person in charge of putting these windows together, she's just a person. Not sure why I put this one in here, but three-dimensional work is fun. This is something we made for my daughter. I wanted to get more like window design projects. So these are some windows I did at the Gateway with my husband. So he's got a sculpture background, so he can kind of figure out how to put things together a little bit. I'll design, and then we put them together. This is at Evo in Salt Lake. It's like in their store. Oh, okay. And then I think this one's my last one, but this one just barely came down from Eccles Theater. But it's my most ambitious project maybe yet. And it's this was the design I gave to them when I applied for the project, but it's like a 40-foot tall mobile. That this is the Eccles lobby at the theater, and it's all about these kids. And again, acrylic, right? So fun to use that material. And this is like an iridescent one, so the light really changes it, and then it reflects all over the floor and all over the ceiling. Sort of hard to get pictures of these, but made these children out of PET felt board, which is a new material that I used, and I painted on it. And then we had acrylic, and then I sewed these. My husband built the frames, but I sewed those umbrellas, which are so much harder than you could possibly imagine to make. I'll never do that again, but I learned. Maybe I'll never do that again. But again, like pushing myself, and now I'm like, maybe I could do more three-dimensional work, and that is exciting to me. And it's not something I would have ever, I think very two-dimensionally, but I think maybe marrying him and he thinks more three-dimensionally, we kind of do these kinds of things together, and it's like the best date night ever when we're both up on a scissor lift putting something together. Okay. Yes. I think I've talked about most of these, but being open-minded, going to things, conferences, study abroad, internships, these kinds of things, that taught me the most as a student. I did an internship with Jeffrey Hine in Salt Lake, who is like amazing. And that was the direction I wanted to go. But I really learned what it was like to be a working artist. I went to conferences. SCBWI is the one if you want to go to for children's book illustration and writing. But critique groups still, it's so nice. I spend so much of my time by myself, but getting together with other people that are like-minded, kind of doing the same things as you, really helps, especially after school when you're not surrounded by teachers and students. Lots of drawing, yes. Online classes. For me, getting an agent was really important, but do you have an agent? You do. Yeah. It's important. She handles all of my contracts and things and gets me more money and then pays for herself by getting that money. So she's
It works.
such a good idea. Yeah. And agents get paid when you get paid. So it's not like I'm paying her. She gets paid when I get paid. So if she gets me work, she gets paid, I get paid. So it's good. Yeah, listen to yourself. Figure out what it is that you really want. You should read the book, do the work. I'm trying to think who it's by. It's the same person that wrote like The Legend of Bagger Vance. I don't know. He wrote this book that was really mind-blowing for me because it talks about like combining things that maybe don't go together. Like maybe you're interested in ballet and you're interested in history and you're interested in like dogs and whatever, but your interests, he talks about like creating a career that's really interesting for you and unique for you. And then like the most successful people in the world are the ones that are creative with what they like and what they're interested in, and they create like their own path. So that was a really interesting book for me. And I'm still trying to figure out what these things are that are really going to take me down the path that I want to be down. But I am on like a path, I get to do a lot of history. I get to do a lot of themes that I'm really interested in, because I was thoughtful about, how to approach my career, and doing things that scare you. Like, oh my gosh, that installation at Eccles is 500 pounds and it could kill someone if it fell on them. So that's very scary for me. But we worked with an engineer and it was fine and nobody died. So it was okay. But that was scary to me. But now I think, okay, I could do something bigger and I could do something, even more three-dimensional, and I can, do something that's even like more terrifying to my brain. And yeah, taking care of yourself is important. As a student, I never slept. And as a working artist, I never sleep. But the days that I really take time to go on a run, take time to sleep, those are the days that I work better. My brain works better. So super important. And that's it. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That was great. So inspiring. Just there's gonna be a Q&A session after Jake speaks, so you'll have some time to ask questions. Um, somebody have found a phone? Somebody lost a cell phone? Anybody found a cell phone? By any chance? Anybody? Nobody found a cell phone yet? If you find it, let me know. Okay, so Jake Parker is a New York Times best-selling illustrator based in Gilbert, Arizona. He's worked for Blue Sky Studios, Marvel, Scholastic, and Bad Robots, and everything from concept art to graphic novels. In 2009, Jake created the popular art challenge Inktober. Jake also created the online education community sbslearn.com, which has taught thousands of people how to level up in their art skills. So we'll have Jake now.
Thank you for the introduction. Thanks, Brooke, for your presentation. That was inspiring for me to like just see your path in art. And I think it kind of harmonizes with what I want to talk about today. I want to start off with a story, if you guys are okay with that. And I was debating whether or not this is something I just kind of was thinking about and learning about recently, and I thought it might be fun to share with you all. So one of the most, I would say, important and impactful films in animation history came out in 1957. All right, and it wasn't a film made by the Walt Disney Animation Company. It wasn't even a film made in the United States. This particular film was made in the Soviet Union. And in the 50s, the Soviet Union was, the world's enemy for a lot of countries, right? But here comes this beautiful animated film called The Snow Queen. And The Snow Queen was, it was important for many reasons. And the reason I think it's important isn't because it was sort of a masterpiece in what animation could be. It wasn't because it pushed the boundaries of what you could do in animation visually, but also like they hired one of the most renowned composers of the Soviet Union to do the score for the animated film. And because it wasn't motivated by capitalism, it was motivated because it was an art project that the government commissioned, essentially. It didn't have it wasn't marketed, and there weren't tie-in toys and stuffed animals and things like that. It was an art project on the scale of an animated film. But those aren't the reasons I think it's the most important. The reason I think it's the most important, actually, because something happened 7 years later in Tokyo, Japan. All right. So what we know about Japan at that time was this was a nation rebuilding itself. This was a nation who just went through one of the worst experiences a nation could go through, being bombed to smithereens, having their entire culture kind of shifted, and having to rebuild their economy, rebuild their identity as a society. And so for the last 20 years prior to the 60s, from the 40s to the 60s, the whole country was united in, so let's rebuild Japan out of the ashes of World War II. And so the animation industry was kind of tangential to that. They were growing in animation because they were inspired by what was happening in the States. And they wanted to contribute to that medium. But because they didn't have the type of resources that the United States had, their animation was done on very small budgets, and they were done cheaply and almost like they were disposable. Okay. But in 1964, there was an animation union meeting happening in Tokyo. And these typical meetings are the animators come together, let's discuss contracts, let's do contract negotiations, working conditions, let's figure out if we can, how we better negotiate for for better jobs and things like that. And it was in this sort of environment that they decided that let's do a screening of the Snow Queen, right? So they show the Snow Queen, and in the audience is a young 20-something animator. And this particular animator, he grew up loving stories. He, as a child, witnessed like bombed out cities. And he kind of grew up during this era of Japan wanting to grow and change itself. And so even though he loved stories, and even though he loved writing and drawing, he felt compelled to not go into animation, but to do like a responsible job. And he studied political science and economics, and he graduated from college in those particular studies, right? But still, like, the draw was, I want to be a part of this. I want to draw. I want to tell stories. So he joined the animation industry regardless. Upon joining the animation industry, he found that it was like a hot mess. Like, all he was doing was in between drawings in horrible working conditions, and not telling, the kinds of stories he was raised on, and just essentially making garbage, right? So the lights dim. The Snow Queen starts flickering on the screen. He watches it, and he is completely transformed by this experience, because here he sees the potential of what animation could actually be. Up to this point, he's like, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have gone into animation. I should probably abandon this career path and go find something out. Maybe go back to political science or something. But he sees this film, and he's like, no, this is for me, and I want to make something as good as the Snow Queen. Now, if you haven't figured it out yet, the animator I'm talking about is Hayao Miyazaki. He would then go on, from that point on, it changed him. And from that point on, he would go on to essentially kind of take control and take charge of what he was going to do in animation. He only picked projects where he could have a little bit more influence in how the story would turn out. He would only work in positions where he could grow as an artist and as a storyteller, instead of just kind of like phoning it in. Some of the things that he saw in the Snow Queen was the antagonist was very complicated. It wasn't just a simple bad guy, but it was the Snow Queen had very complicated like motivations, and she wasn't all evil. She wasn't all good, but she was like this complex character. There were characters in it, like a strong female character is sort of who's driving the story in the Snow Queen. The whole story was like based on Russian culture. And he saw that this movie was like a good conduit for taking their culture to the rest of the world. And it also had like deeper messages and deeper themes in it that you weren't getting from like a Disney film, right? So he saw that and he's like, okay, this is what I want to do with my work and my films. And what he essentially became from that point out was a deliberate creator. And that's really what I want to talk about today, is how to become a deliberate creator. And it's really my guide, or a guide for creative success in the 21st century. If you think about Miyazaki's career from the 60s to the 2020s, he just came out with a film last year, is he had a career in a crazy tumultuous time, like through the 60s, through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the last, a couple decades, where he saw not just societal changes, but also like medium changes. Animation, traditional hand-drawn animation has completely like sort of left the scene, right? It doesn't happen in the States. It doesn't happen very many places, but he is like stuck with making traditional animated films, and he's used his films to do those types of things that he saw in the Snow Queen to share Japan's culture with the world, to show how beautiful animation could be, to show that humans are complex characters and we're not like in one particular box, but that there's good and evil in all of us. to show that he's like kind of pioneered the strong female protagonist. If you look at many of his films, that's who's starring in it, right? And that wasn't a thing before he came along. And then he would go on to inspire John Lasseter, to start Pixar and to make films in that way, where a film didn't have to be like a string of songs, but it could be something that tells a really emotional story. And that's all Pixar is about. Any animator operating at a high level is inspired by Miyazaki. So I'll go back to that initial thesis statement, I guess, that one of the most important films in animation history was The Snow Queen, because it was a great film, but also because of the trajectory that it put Miyazaki on, and how it got him to be a deliberate creator. And I want to talk today about how we can be deliberate creators in the 21st century. So the first thing is the 21st century, there's an upside to it, right? It's opened up a world of new possibilities to people who create things for a living. When I was a kid, growing up in the 80s, it was my dream to maybe someday be have a comic in the newspaper or work on an animated film. But now with the 20th century, there's all this technology that allows people to essentially make an animated film in their home, make a graphic novel in their home, and share it with the world. They don't need a distributor. They can just click send, right? But there's a bunch of downsides as well. Many of these 21st century advancements, kind of like a Trojan horse, where they deceptively subvert your creativity, your mastery, your productivity, and your purpose, where you can kind of get lost in all these different opportunities and all these different paths that you have before you. So here's some of these specific problems. Mass distraction. How many of you have seen your friend DM'd you on Instagram, you go to check it, and then pretty soon you realize the sun has gone down, a few hours have passed, and you've just been scrolling and scrolling. You're like, what the heck? So mass distraction is a huge thing. I just read an article in the New York Times about Netflix, and it said that if you watch Netflix for 3 hours every day, it would take you 29 years to watch the entire library on there. So there's so many things out there to distract you. Escalating competition. One of the cool things about the 21st century is technology has been democratized in a way. Procreate and the iPad are a powerful combination where you can get very great tools at a low price compared to what you've ever been able to have access to before. But with that, so many more people are able to use these tools to make beautiful things. And so now you're competing, instead of competing with 1,000 people, you're competing with 1 million people, right? There's an overflow of opportunities. It used to be that you would just have 1 or 2 options in a career path in the arts, but now there are so many different jobs. I mean, you just saw what Brooke was showing us, how all the different projects that you've done. Who would have thought you could do murals for a living, right? But there's people that want murals, and there's so many different opportunities. Earning a living's gotten harder with inflation, with skyrocketing prices, with the competition, things like that. Rapid technological change too, just keeping up with different versions of software. I use the latest version of Photoshop because that's what was downloaded on my computer, but I only use the features available since Photoshop 6, right? And it's Photoshop 24 or whatever. But there's so many different things you can do. And I just even think about AI is this huge thing that sort of just bombed us right now. And how do we even deal with that? And then this is another, there's this distancing of in-person relationships and experiences. So much of what we experience is online. And that's just another challenge of the 21st century. This is something important, I think, is that there's qualities, there's mindsets, there's skills that led you to be sitting in this room. But most likely those aren't the skills, mindset, and qualities that you're going to need to survive in the creative world moving forward. They're good enough to get you into school, but to be successful in the creative world, you're going to have to level up, okay? In the coming years, you're going to have to transform yourself into something tougher, more resilient, and more adaptable. You're going to have to be consciously engaged in your craft. You're going to have to be intentional in your strategy. You're going to have to be calculated in your career path. You're going to need to be a deliberate creator. And here's how you're going to do it. We've got 4 things I'm going to talk about. And they are mastery, creativity, productivity, and purpose. So let's just dig down into them. First thing is deliberate mastery. Okay? And each one of these, I've got a little quote to go with them. This is Eric Hoffer. If you don't know who he was like a mid-century, like blue-collar workman. He was a longshoreman, like unloading ships, right? But he was also a philosopher. So he's this guy that would work all day on the docks, like with normal, regular people. But then he'd go home at night and like write all these deep thoughts, and he won these awards, writing books and whatnot. But he says, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. So in deliberate mastery, your objective is to get to the point that you're so good you can't be ignored. Okay, so how do you do that? Number 1, show up daily. This, to succeed in the creative field, it's not a every once in a while, I'm going to go and draw in my sketchbook. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do it for a couple months and then take off a couple months. It's like an everyday thing. You just have to show up every day and create something every single day. So that's something that if you're not doing, start doing. Number 2, practice deep work. Deep work there's an entire book about it. I could do 3 hours on just talking about deep work, but in a nutshell, what deep work is carving out enough time to where you can get into a flow state. And one of the 21st century problems is like this assault on boredom. Like, it is bad to be bored, and nobody is ever bored anymore. And one thing I've been trying to do is train myself to like embrace boredom. So I'm waiting at the airport for my ride to show up. Hand goes in the pocket, pulls out phone, starts scrolling. That's a sign of not embracing boredom. Instead, hold the hand, don't reach into the pocket, and just stand there and like look around. And what happens in those quiet moments is your brain starts connecting dots and you start thinking about things. And it's all training for when you're sitting at your desk creating, and you could do these long stretches and get into that flow state. And the other thing is making sure that you don't like wait for that to happen, but you actually schedule time for those uninterrupted flow states. Could be the morning time, could be the evening time. It's up to you. But skill stretching. This is another thing. I pushed back against this early on, but I realized I needed to embrace this as well. And that is, if there's something that you don't like to draw, or you don't like to create, or you don't want to learn, that's the thing you absolutely need to be working on. Okay. A lot of times, and I would look through students' sketchbooks and see like they love drawing a particular character, a particular head design, and their sketchbook is just full of that. And I'm like, where's the environments? Oh, I don't like drawing environments. I'm like, that's what you have to work on. That's what you have to focus on. That's skill stretching. Or the reverse, all these environments, like, where's your people? People are too hard to draw. That's what you got to be working on. So look for those things. If you're feeling like it's uncomfortable, it's the thing you don't want to do, that's a good sign. That's a thing you should be working on. Create a feedback loop. Okay, this is how you're going to be deliberate in your mastery. And what that is when you create something, you find a person, could be a teacher, a mentor of some kind, could be a friend, could be it could be just posting it online, but you ask for specific feedback. And they'll tell you, oh, I like this, I don't like that. And whatever they say, you kind of apply that to the next piece and you work on that. And it creates this, and then you show that again, like, hey, how's this? Hey, that part's good. Actually, you need to work on that, hand's a little wonky. So you go back, and that's how you get better. And then lastly, there's 2 more. Teach what you know. This one's huge, because in order for you to like fully absorb something, I think you have to share it and show someone else how to do it. Okay, so if you just discovered how to draw in 3-point perspective and you're like, oh, I'm starting to figure it out, I'm starting pretty good. You really want to know if you know it, go teach someone else how to do it. And what happens is everything starts to synthesize in your head, and you're starting to pull things, and you start to understand it at like a very core fundamental level. and not a surface level. And so I would fold teaching into your mastery. This could be something you could do as a student, because there's other students who their skills don't overlap with your skills. So it's a great way to for everybody to get better, because you're all helping each other. But as you move forward and as you get more successful in your career and you're working, don't forget to look for opportunities to just pass on your knowledge and share it, because it's going to help you understand it so much better. And then the last one for mastery is to keep exploring. Me and my buddies were talking about this. I have a couple of art buddies, and we were talking about how come there's some artists who just don't get the work anymore, and they don't get the jobs anymore. And we're looking at it, and it's well, they're not doing the art. They're their art's dated, or they don't understand how to use computer tools anymore, or they don't understand, they never learned how to do 3D or whatever. And it's because they just sort of found the thing that they liked and they stopped. And I'm just going to stay right here. And I think in order to really succeed and thrive in this century, you have to keep exploring. You have to keep looking. Brooke's a beautiful example of that, what she just showed. She could have just stopped with 100 ink drawings, but she went from these 100 ink drawings to a 500-pound mural, hanging installation that could kill somebody. That is incredible. All right, the next one is deliberate creativity. Okay, this is a Steve Jobs quote. He says, "Creativity is just connecting things." The quote is actually much longer, and I'm going to read the whole thing for you right here because I love it. And it works so well. He says, "Creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something. It seemed obvious to them after a while. That's because they were able to connect experiences they've had and synthesize new things. And the reason they were able to do that was that they've had more experiences, or they've thought more about their experiences than other people. Unfortunately, that's a too rare a commodity. A lot of people in our industry haven't had very diverse experiences, so they don't have enough dots to connect, and they end up with very linear solutions without a broad perspective on the problem. The broader one's understanding of the human experience, the better design we will have." And really, I think one of the key factors of being creative is having a broad understanding of experience. And so your objective in being deliberately creative is to eliminate that friction between new ideas, new experiences, and your perception of them. A lot of us can just walk through life not really noticing the stuff around us when there's so many things to be inspired by in just normal everyday life. Okay, so what I call that is filling your creative bank account. Now, the way you fill your creative bank account is through embracing and absorbing experiences. And there's two kinds. There's direct experiences and indirect experiences. So direct experiences are anything you experience personally. And it could be as extreme as going on a backpacking trip to Europe and just absorbing all the culture. And it could be as mundane as Thanksgiving dinner with your family in next month, right? Because if you're going into it with filling this creative bank account, let me explain that a little bit. When you create, you use creative capital. And if you don't have enough creative capital stored up, you're going to either get artist block or not create anything really inspired at all. And so the best way to fight against that is to just constantly be filling your creative bank account with ideas and with things, and essentially, like Steve Jobs says, dots. And then your job when you sit down to create is oh, I've got this thing here, I got this thing here. What if we put those together? No one ever really thought to put those together again. Would that work, right? So you do it through these direct experiences. So it's like traveling. It could be maybe you never go to the west side of Salt Lake City and hang out for a day there. Maybe you go over there, take a sketchbook and look at the warehouses. There might be something interesting there, right? Maybe it's just paying close attention to time spent with friends and relatives and family members. Everyone has a weird uncle. That could be a character in a graphic novel someday, just inspired by whatever they were talking about at Thanksgiving dinner, right? Indirect experiences, those are experiences that you have through the lens of someone else. So it's watching films. It's going to the theater. It's going to a museum and looking at art and looking at artifacts. It's reading books. It's listening to music, because what you're doing is you're having experiences that have been filtered through someone else's experiences, and that affects you as well. And those are little dots that you can then connect. And so it's cool when you can like I listened to this really neat album by this artist, and I went to this, I went on vacation to this one place. And I was inspired by the murals that I saw there. What if we connected those somehow and I made a graphic novel out of it? It's those kinds of things. The next thing I think in order to be deliberately creative is to remove algorithmic influence in your online life. The way the internet is now, I hate it. And I love pre-algorithm internet, where you would just go on and you were kind of in charge of finding whatever interests you. And the beautiful thing about that is you kind of had to wade through a lot of stuff that didn't interest you. But the nice side effect of that is you were exposed to things that you would never have been wanted to expose to or think to be exposed to that might excite you or inspire you. Okay, so what I would say is seek out those websites that predate social media. Like, get off of social media and go to like a website like Flickr. Flickr is where people just upload their photos that they've taken or upload interesting pictures that, this is just one example, that they find online. I like to type in, like right now you type in Halloween ephemera, right? And there's people who collect like mid-century or turn of the century, 100 years ago, postcards of like Halloween cards that you would send to, like back then you would send a friend a Halloween card, like Happy Halloween. And it's just the weirdest, coolest, fun stuff to look at. Like, are you guys familiar with Over the Garden Wall? Yeah, it's such a cool animated series. If you haven't seen that, like, this is the season 2, watch that. But a lot of that is inspired by some of these postcards where I'm saying like gourd people. Like, that was the thing, is you'd not just carve a pumpkin, but you would like get another gourd for the body, and you get like corn stalks for the arms, and you put little hats on them, and these guys would come to life on Halloween, and witches would like run away from them and stuff. That's just one example. I would never really be exposed to that or even think to go there, because my algorithm doesn't know that I want to be surprised like that, right? Does that make sense? So whatever you can do is go to the websites where they don't feed you what the algorithm thinks you want, but you kind of have to search and hunt for it. One of my favorite things to do there is to find an artist that I like and to go see the things that they like and see what sort of inspired them. So there's like on Flickr, you can look at someone's likes, and then you'll see like they're into way different stuff than I'm in, but it's actually kind of interesting. And the same thing on like DeviantArt or ArtStation or Pinterest or things like that, is you can kind of get lost into these little avenues that you would never think to do. So that's online life. The other thing is consume tangible media. And I would say what's weird now is like anything prior to like the early 2020s is, I think, going to be very, very valuable, because we know for sure it hasn't been influenced by AI. And everything from the here on out has been tainted by AI somehow, whether it was somewhere in production or somehow inspired by it or something. There's just like, it's like infecting everything. And so if you go back to, I was talking to my friend about this, I love watching movies that were filmed before CGI, before computer animation, because everything I see on the screen was something that was actually filmed. It wasn't computerized or anything. And even if it was a special effects, it was still filmed. So you see 1,000 extras running across the desert in like Lawrence of Arabia. Like, they didn't fake that. They actually got 1,000 extras and camels and everything to like, okay, in action. And everybody's running across. I'm like, holy cow, that's one take. And that just really gives me, like, we use the word awesome a little too loosely, but that really inspires awe in me to see these things that we used to do as creatives prior to computers. And there's something really special about that. And so I think that's something that can help you be a little bit more deliberately creative. So tangible media, it's not just film, but read actual books. There's again, the boredom problem. It's kind of boring to read a book cover to cover, but that's something that we need to do at this stage, I think, to kind of take back that ability to be able to concentrate. Go to libraries. One of the things I like about libraries is sort of the same thing, is it removes an algorithm out of your life. When you go to a library, there's certain sections you like for me, I like to go to the art books. But in order to go to the art books, I have to like walk past the architecture books, or the books about gardening, or the books about automobiles, or like the train section. And because I'm visually inspired, I'll like see a binding, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'll pull that book out. Never would have thought to like check this book out of the library, but now I'm looking through something that I didn't go into the library to get. And pretty soon I'm walking out of the library with like 50 books of stuff that I never would have like really thought to search out. But because I was exposed to it by walking through a library, I now am like filling this creative bank account in a much bigger, more deliberate way. Lastly on this, I want to talk about the algebra of creativity. And it is this: C equals A plus C plus S. And this is how everything I've been talking about deliberate creativity, this is how it all comes together. This is the equation, okay? So C stands for creativity, obviously. A is accountability, C is constraints, and S is skill, okay? So accountability is, who are you accountable to? It could be a fan base. It could be a teacher. It could be yourself. If you don't have some level of accountability, it's hard to deliver something in a timely manner or in a creative manner because you're unaccountable. You can just kind of do whatever you want. Constraints are also very important because constraints kind of put you in a little box, and if you don't have a box, you can't think outside of the box, right? So you have to like give yourself a box to be to like push against and to like stretch against. And I think that's where real creativity happens, because an artist who has skill and accountability that has no constraints will ultimately fail to deliver something meaningful. An artist with accountability and constraints but no skill will fail to deliver something beautiful. And an artist with skill and constraints but with no accountability will fail to deliver anything at all. All right, deliberate productivity. Okay, I found this awesome picture of Walt Disney. This is when he was young and scrappy, and like he didn't know he was going to be successful. I don't even know if he had come up with Mickey Mouse yet at this photo, but the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. Okay, so what's your objective with deliberate productivity is to create a body of work that supports and advances your career. And here's how you're going to do that. Have an action bias versus a reaction bias. So a lot of times we kind of just wait around for someone to give us an assignment, or someone to say, hey, you should do this, or waiting for the right time for something to all this, like the plans to be in line, or my skills to be at a certain level, or when I save up to get this computer or this camera, I can do this now. That is like a reaction bias, and that's waiting for things to fall into place. And if you're going to be successful, you actually have to have an action bias, which is what I have now is what I'm going to use to create. And in a way that might even make you more creative. But the real thing is you're actually going to start getting stuff done if you have an action bias. So I'm working on a project right now and with a couple other people, and they're like, well, when we get this, and this in place, then we can do it. I was like, guys, let's just get like wheels on this thing and get it rolling. And then we can add an engine later. And then we can like put on the car doors and the windows. We're not building a car, but it's something, creative. And I was like, let's just get it going so that we can like have it done instead of waiting forever, because I was worried it wouldn't happen. Urgency versus importance. This is another thing you need to learn to understand. Urgency is something that requires immediate action or attention. And important is anything I think that it's something of great significance, something of value. It's likely to have a profound effect on your success or your survival or your well-being. Those are important things. Important is something, this is a good way to look at it. It's something you look back on from your deathbed and wish you had done, or you're so thankful that you had done. So obviously, it's like, I wish I'd spent more time with friends, with family. I wish I had, like, obviously relationships are big, but I think a step underneath that is your creativity. I wish I had actually gone and made that film that I always had, or wrote that script, or did that installation, or made that book, or wrote that book. You don't want to be sitting on your deathbed and thinking, man, I time's up. I never got around to it, right? So this is an Eisenhower matrix. And essentially, this is a good way to like figure this stuff out. You have high urgency at the top, low urgency on the bottom, high importance on the right, low importance on the left. And so what's low importance and low urgency? Scrolling Instagram. Not important, really not urgent. Okay? Oftentimes, that's what we find ourselves doing. And you have to realize what I'm doing right now is neither important nor urgent. I should stop. Unless it is important and urgent, like you're completely done for the day, you created so much that you just need to like unwind, maybe that is important then. But for the most part, I don't think so. Okay, so what's high urgency, high importance? Got to mail that check to the IRS. Because if you don't, they're going to come get you, right? So a lot of times it's stuff like, that's weird. I'm maybe having a heart attack. It must be important. Better get to the ER, right? Those are like real things that high important, high urgency things are things that it's very clear that if you don't do them, it's going to affect your well-being. It's going to affect your survivability, things like that. Okay, the gray area though is what's low importance but high urgency, or the opposite. So low importance, high urgency is something like answering emails. Like they're very urgent, but how important is getting an inbox 0, right? Like how important is that when you compare it to high importance, low urgency things, and that's making art. And so the problem is a lot of times we default to the urgent. And if you do that too much, you're never going to make the art that you need to make. So it's important to make the time and carve out the time to do high importance, low urgency things. Products versus projects. A lot of times we get caught up in, this is a very important thing to get, especially as a student, to like figure out the difference between. A project is something that really doesn't have like an ending to it. It's just a thing that you're working on and you're always contributing to. And maybe someday it will become a thing. But too often we get involved in projects and we don't have a product mindset. And a product is something that it's either tangible or it's something that you can deliver to somebody. So it could be like a finished website, portfolio website. That would be a finished product that you can then send out to an agent or to art directors or things like that. It could be like a zine. You know, you have this cool idea for either a comic or like a short story or something like that, an art project. And you like, if your idea is like, I want a finished zine that I can print out and hand to friends or sell at a show or something like that, that's a finished product. It could be, you know, a script that you're writing for a short film or for an animated film or something like that. Too often, if we don't look at like having something finished, tangible that you can hold in your hands, or something like a PDF that you can email to somebody that's finite and contained, we get into this like cycle of, it just needs to be a little bit better. And then I just got to fix this and work on that a little bit more. And if you don't have a product mindset, that stuff never gets finished. Systems versus goals. A lot of times, you know, there's like, you know, you hear a lot like set goals and work towards those goals. But goals are not as important as the systems that we create for ourselves to accomplish those goals. Because if you create a system where my system is I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning, and from 5 to 7 o'clock, those 2 hours where I know nobody's trying to call me and nobody's going to like interrupt me, and I don't feel like tempted to go on social media because my brain is fresh and everything. If I do that every day and I am able to chip out, you know, one page on this project that I'm doing, eventually you're not just going to surpass the goal of like finishing a 10-page or 100-page, you know, comic that you're working on, but that system is going to lead to making 2 of those, making 3 of those, making 10 of those. And a lot of times our goals can hinder us in a way, because once you've accomplished it, or maybe you never accomplish it, you're sort of beholden to that goal instead of building out these systems. Lastly, about this one, finished versus perfect. That's like my mantra is like, yes, it could be perfect, but am I sacrificing it being a finished product if I'm focused so much on perfect? So honestly, I feel like you get to perfection through a series of finished things. And eventually you get to a point where the thing that you're finishing 10 years from now is so much better than the thing that you were trying to perfect 10 years ago, right? And so if you have that finished versus perfect mindset, it's just going to lead to you having those finished products, understanding what's important versus urgent, understanding that you need to take action instead of reacting to things, and really building on that systems of it. Okay, deliberate purpose. I love this quote by Dolly Parton. Find out who you are and do it on purpose. And there's actually another quote that is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, which goes a little bit deeper in that. It says, the purpose of life is not to be happy. It's to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. And I think happiness is a byproduct of you having a purpose, of being useful, of being compassionate, of living your life well. So if you are moving forward with deliberate purpose, your objective is to figure out who you serve and how you are best equipped to do so. And this might be one of the most important things, is to figure out where you fit. Okay, so how do you figure that out? You ask this question, who do you want to serve the most? Okay, there's really kind of three answers there. You either serve yourself, you serve your fans or a community, or you serve an employer. All right? And if you think about your personality, think about the ways that you like working, the things that you like making, it might be that for you, art is completely for yourself and you don't care what anybody else thinks. And once you figure that out, you're going to be way happier realizing that you're not going to find success doing art for an employer. You're not going to find success trying to appease fans or a community. You're going to have success because you created that thing for yourself. On the flip side, you might be a person who loves to please other people and you want this interaction with fans and you want to make something for a group of people. That's going to make you happy because you're serving those people and you're giving them a thing that they want. And it might overlap with a little bit of self there. The thing with employer too, like I've worked with people and I've worked for employers before, and there was a lot of people who were unhappy working in an animation studio, creating like some of the coolest animated films ever. And they were unhappy because they wanted to make art for themselves, not for either the fan base that was in love with these characters or for their employer who like gave them that job, right? But once you figure that out and you're like, well, I really do like working for somebody. I really like having them sort of tell me, here's what I want you to do. And I like delivering it and, doing a good job and getting a thumbs up. Once you figure that out, you're going to be so far ahead of other people. The second part of this is, what can you make? Okay. So your interests, your ability and skill are all sort of at play here. You might be interested in 3D animation, but your ability with understanding computers isn't up to that level, and your skill level isn't there. Maybe you're really just good at making murals or making collages or something like that. So sometimes you're at the mercy of what your skill level is, what your ability is, and what your interests are. So once you figure out, and these things can change and they take years to figure out, but understanding it through this lens can really get you going on the right path. So figure out what your interests, skills, and abilities are. And then lastly, how do you do your best work? Do you work fast or do you work slow? Do you like working at home or do you like working around people? You need to have like interaction with other people. What's your temperament? Are you risk averse or do you like taking risks? Right? So once you figure this out, who's the one you serve, working in the way that works best for you, doing the thing that you do best, where all of that overlaps, that's where you fit. And it might mean you don't fit in an animation studio. It might mean that you fit working with publishers, or it might mean you don't fit working with publishers and you need to work in an animation studio or a video game studio or something like that. So that's it. Deliberate mastery, deliberate creativity, deliberate productivity, and deliberate purpose. These are the things that I think you're gonna have to master. You're gonna have to do deliberately in order to succeed. Going back to Miyazaki, this was a guy who took the jobs that gave him mastery so he could get really good at doing the art form. He was deliberately creative. This is a guy who was looking at you look at a Miyazaki film, it's unlike anything else because he's pulling from this massive creative bank account and making these amazing films. Productivity. This is a guy who does thousands upon thousands of drawings for each animated film. So he's figured out how to focus and how to get that deep work time and how to come up with these ideas and actually produce them. He's not a guy that's like waiting around for someone to say, hey, Miyazaki, why don't you go make a film about a pig who flies a red airplane? But he's like, no, that's the idea. Let's get it done. And then purpose. This is a guy who had deliberate purpose, who wanted to share his culture with the world, who wanted to create beautiful art and felt like animation was the medium that he worked best in and that fit his abilities and his personality. And he really figured out that Venn diagram of all those things going together. There's three things I want to share in my own career and in my own life where all of these things have come together. Number one is Missile Mouse. This is my first graphic novel that came out. And to talk about being creative deliberately, this really came about. This is a character I created when I was in junior high. And eventually, 20 years later, got a book deal with Scholastic to make a Missile Mouse graphic novel. The cool thing about that was because I was being deliberately creative and putting these things into practice, I made this book that I get emails now, and I got emails then, but even like this week, I got an email from somebody, or it was like a message on thing that said, Missile Mouse, I read this as a kid. It inspired me to want to do comics and to be a comic artist. I don't know if I feel sorry for him or if I'm happy for him, but the fact that it inspired him. I also got an email from a mom several years ago who said her son had to spend a lot of time in the hospital. He had I don't know exactly what disease he had, but she said his Missile Mouse comics were the only thing that like could keep his mind off of the pain and to like help him get through this hard time. So thank you so much for making it. And I'm just sitting in my basement drawing comics about a missile mouse, right? Whatever that is. And I'm thinking, this is fulfilling me, but what I didn't realize was my deliberate creativity, being a deliberate creator was actually having impact on other people as well. Same thing with Inktober. In 2009, I wanted to get better at inking. I had friends who were doing fitness challenges, like a 30-day push-up challenge or whatever. And I was like, what if I did, like there weren't art challenges in the early 2000s, right? But there were like fitness challenges. And I was like, what if we did an art challenge like that, like 30 days of one thing? So I was like, I'm going to do 30 days of ink because I want to get better at inking. And I showed up every year doing it. In the first 5 or 6 years, it was like another person did it with me. Oh, I'll do that with you. Then 10 people, then 100 people. And then it kind of hit this crescendo as people started getting on social media, and social media had this amplifying effect. And now hundreds of thousands of people do Inktober every year. And the messages that I get from these people are, oh my gosh, Jake, thank you for creating this. You reminded me what it was to be creative. Like I wasn't drawing anymore. And now I draw. Or I just talked to a woman a couple weeks ago, and she's like, she started crying. Her husband had died the previous year, and she was looking for something to do with her kids. Her husband was creative. He liked to draw. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect thing for me to do with my kids because it'll like connect us with creativity. And I'm not very good at that, but it's like a framework and a structure for me to spend time with them. So thank you for creating this. Lastly, the School of Visual Storytelling. Robinson mentioned it briefly. This is a way for me to pass my knowledge onto other people in like as affordably as possible, and as like a way for people to do it who don't have access to a great school like this. It's just an online school. Me and a few other illustrators were like, let's just make some videos and teach people how to do the things that we know how to do and offer it at a fair price. And so the messages that I get from these people, and seeing people who go through these courses that we do, and like, I got an agent, Jake. Thank you so much for helping me get an agent. I got my first book deal. Thank you so much for that. Like, that right there is another sort of ripple effect of me being a deliberate creator, because it not just helped me and myself in my career, but it's amplified out into the lives of others. And really the last message, and I think Brooke's presentation summed this up as well, is that what you create ends up creating you. The things that you put your time into, the things that you put your effort into, the things that you do deliberately turn you into the person that you are. So think about who you want to become. Think about the type of creative person that you want to be, and go and do that deliberately. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you guys, I hope you've taken a lot of this. I've learned a lot. I mean, it's very inspiring, you know, and if you think your life is tough, just make an illustration about it. You know, nobody likes to read a story of somebody drinking lemonade by the swimming pool, you know. You want to see how somebody made it. And so, great advice we received today. We're going to have some Q&A now. So we're going to turn on the lights, and you guys will have, I think Jake needs to board a plane soon. I'm not sure. So we'll have about 10 minutes. Yeah, sometime. We'll have 10, 12 minutes of Q&A. If you have questions, I have a couple microphones here. So let's turn on the lights.
How about you make a wall switch it over there? That's that. And over here, that's a line to up to. You know, now big is on here. I would ask you guys about maybe the age, any advice, trains, colleagues.
Eating.
Oh, I should try the door in that. Think
Criticism.
one for us and one for that. Yeah, I mean, cool. That's really well, but I thought it. I mean, foods that worse. So.
Well, I is maybe pretty specific, but I went out to so at PBW I gave children's book writers and illustrators that at the gospel. But I went to they do the winter conference and the summer conference. The winter one is in New York, the summer one is in LA. I've never been to the LA one, but there's a sub-party once. But winter in New York, you're there to learn because it's February and it's really cold. But that one is really great to go to because you take a portfolio and then they have a whole, you leave your portfolios out, and then they have a night where the different publishing houses come, art directors come, editors, agents. And for me, so there's a competition that I'm on 1 year, this competition, and then I got all of these emails from agents that year. But for me, I mean, I've taught at BYU. I don't write athletic advocate, but it seems like the best way is to kind of figure out, you know, maybe some illustrators that you like, look at who represents them, look who that agency represents. Do you want a big agency? Do you want a small one? Big ones sometimes can get more work because they're bigger. Smaller ones can spend a little bit more time on you. You're also sometimes within an agency competing against the more popular, you know, I was trying to be represented by the same person that represents Milk Williams. Well, Williams gets the emails a lot more than she does, but so kind of just deciding like what kind of an agent you want. Also, different agents take different fees. Mine pays 15% because she's a literary agent. So if I ever want to write books and illustrate, she could represent me for files. But yeah, you probably had some more shit.
That's pretty good. The other thing is, like, build out a network or friendship group of people who are also doing that in the industry, because somebody among the group is going to get an agent, and that agent's going to be like, hey, is there anybody else that you're that is like you that I could represent? That's how I got an agent. Was a friend of mine got an agent, and then she recommended me to her as well. So it's one part networking, it's one part looking, like hunting them out and searching for them. You don't have to stick with an agent. You can do it for a couple of projects and move on to someone else if you need to. I haven't done that. I was trying to have like 5 agents. And then every agency has a website that sends here's our submission guidelines and just all of those specifically. Because if you don't, they're like, this is a wild card. They can't even follow our instructions. So I think that's legit.
What?
Yeah.
So Brooke, I was wondering how you kind of lead the transition from fine art and what medium you're using now, kind of wish that you made that crossover.
Yeah, that was hard. Again, a lot of it had to do with these personal projects that I did. I mostly work. I'm not the visual person, but Procreate is so easy to use that I do all of my sketching in Procreate just because it's simple and it's easy to get back and forth with art directors I've used. But I do most of my finished work in watercolor and wash, and that's a way I'll do different things with that. But and the transition, yeah, I talked about it a little bit. That 100-day project honestly started getting me so much work because of I think I think that emotional connection, I don't know, but that's probably the most where I was doing projects before that. I mean, did these portraits of people in watercolor. I did probably 100 of those. And that was something that started getting me just money, to start doing projects that I was interested in. And then you never know, like I was dating somebody that lived in New York and I was on a midnight flight back on JetBlue and I was trying to get some sleep and this teenage kid next to me was like, my mom's an art director. And I'm like, okay, let's talk. I'm like so tired. But hit that connection. He was like, I'm going to give my mom your contact info. And that was my first editorial job with his mom, who was an art director. But that's more and more. But definitely doing the projects, the personal projects, that 100-day work. For some reason, by the end of those 100 days, I was getting work. And it was like 90 days in a row-ish. And then the last 10 was Scramble Museum saying, we want to put your 100 days up. And so that was probably a year later that I finished those last 10. And that's why I think there is such a jump from like the first one to the last one. But yeah, doing work that is exciting to giving yourself deadlines that, like Jay said, like you have the skill, you have the creativity. Yeah, it's the skill and you have to, but if you aren't actually like doing it, then nothing will come from it. Yeah. So I'm off the hands.
So what words of encouragement do you guys have for artists working discouraged about the rise of AI and stuff like that?
I know at least in publishing, people want to see work that is made by people, and I am encouraged by that. Also, my murals, I'm like, oh, my hands can make this mural. I think just realizing that is here and figuring out how to work in a role that does have AI. That's for me. I've gone back to what am I doing? What industries am I in? How do I want to move forward? The people that I want to work with want to work with people. So finding those jobs that it is has that doesn't include AI.
I would say too, first off, it's not over yet. They're still trying to figure out if it's even legal or copyrightable. So, for publishers, nobody wants to touch it because say you create something with AI, or they hire somebody and they make an AI cover for the book, if it's not copyrightable, then anybody can use that image for their book, right? So there's sort of those things. There's still legislation that's like being figured out about how do we protect creators? How do we use this responsibly? So like I would take heart in knowing that like it's not over yet. And there's like the problem isn't really AI art, it's IA, which is industrialized art, which has already been a problem we've been dealing with, where so many people are like just trying to get art as cheaply as possible. And I think that's something that's mirrored in like the food world, where McDonald's has made it possible to get food as cheaply as possible. And if they could eliminate their workers, they would. They would just have a machine that could spit out a burger. Does that mean everybody's going to go eat at McDonald's? No, you still want like a handmade burger every once in a while, or you don't even want a burger, you want like a really tasty salad that you made at home, right? And so I think it's the same with art. Like there's people that are just like, yeah, I just need, like, I see a lot of AI in places where I haven't seen it before, which is like YouTube videos where people are doing like video essays, and they just need an image to go along with it. And prior to AI, they were using clip art and like photo, what's it called? Like Getty Images art, photos and stuff like that. And now they'll just render out, like, I need a person shouting something, and then they got that, right? They didn't really steal the job from anybody doing that, right? So I think it's not as bleak as people say it is. And it could actually be kind of cool to have like an AI, like I use Photoshop's autofill for like my canvas needs to be an inch wider over here. And I'll just select it and like just fill it with these pixels. So instead of using the stamp tool, it's like, and it finishes it, and it's better than I could have done. Awesome, let's keep doing that. And I'm not using it to be like, I needed you to generate like a really cool looking cactus right here. I'm like, that's my job. I'll make a cool looking cactus, right? So it's there to like help us with some of those things. Honestly, I'd love AI to just do taxes for me and read the art to me. So
a super selfish question about how many words of advice for people working on indie stuff, like from seed from animation, like that.
Yeah, like the big thing there is seriously just finish it and put it out there, because and absolutely do that stuff, because when you make a zine or a comic or something like that, you're not just learning the art of storytelling, but you're learning graphic design. You're learning production. Like, how do I get these images that I made over here, but in a book, and it feels right and they just turn good? How do I get it produced, like bound, stapled, and printed? How do I then distribute it? Like, how do I get these 50 copies that I made out to people who need it, right? And every time you do that, you get a little bit better at it, a little bit better at it. And even if you end up doing children's book illustrations and you're just the illustrator, you have a much greater appreciation for the whole production line, because you're working with art directors, you're working with editors, you're working with print shops and printers, and you can just understand, you can sort of speak their language a little bit better. So just keep doing it and make it and finish it and go on to the next one, make outload, finish it, and get in your mind that you're not going to make one, you're going to make 10,
And I was just wondering so when you're first starting out, you get like that first inquiry about a job. How do you kind of go about just getting over the fear of starting into the industry, like things like actually real? And then also part of that is think of how do you advocate starting out for yourself when it comes to pay or anything really, just advocating for yourselves.
Yeah, everyone's gonna say, hey, we really like to do this thing for $50, and you need to just know that, that's $50 is not worth my time. I think talking to the other people who are starting out, figuring out what a fair price is, and then figuring out like what's worth it to you, you know, if it is your first job, you know, is it something you're interested in? For me, it's like, is the money good? Is it something I'm interested in? If like both of those are no, then I'm like, why would I do this job, you know? But if it's something that you're like, okay, like it's a spot in a magazine and it's a magazine I want to be in, maybe it's a really small spot and it's not a lot of money. But if I do that spot and I do it well and I do it on time, then they will hire me again, you know? So I think just making sure it's worth it in some way. Will this help my career? Will this help me get to where I want to go? Like, not every job I've done pays well or is a fun job, but sometimes it's one or the other. Sometimes you do just living. Sometimes you just something really passionate about.
Yeah, right. Might just add to that. I would add to it that I had a friend who we were talking about comics, and for me, there have been times where I had tried to make money with comics and ended up not making a good comic and now making a lot of money from it, right? And there's been times where I've just focused on making the best comic I could make. And what ends up happening is when money's removed from the equation, I make really good work. And my friend was like, we were talking about this and scratching our heads, and he was like, you know what, Jake? Do whatever you got to do to make money, but just leave comics for yourself, because you're going to be happier. You'll probably be more successful when you remove it from the equation. And so for the last few years, all I've been doing is making comics for myself. And lo and behold, the job comes in. I just told her about it. Scholastic hired me to do a graphic novel, which they wouldn't have hired me before because I had grown by making really good comics on my own and not just taking any comics job that was coming away. That's that. I think you shouldn't just take any job that comes to you unless it's like, this is going to elevate my profile. Maybe the pay isn't quite as good, but my profile will be elevated because I did it. So maybe, maybe it's an illustration for a magazine and just the right people that you want to have access to are going to read that magazine. That might be good. But if it's not going to elevate the profile, you're so better off just doing something for yourself and going and working, at a coffee shop and doing that for money so you can make really, really good art.
Okay, mine is basically how you get attention with the oversaturation of algorithms that we talked about earlier. Like, how do you just stand out and get people to like your art?
Do that. It is hard. It's very difficult right now, and I sympathize because even in my position where I have more eyeballs on me, I'm still like, guys, look at this thing I made, and nobody sees everything right now. So I think you need to get in your mind a body of work and not a single project as in it people's attention. And and someone explained to me like this one time, that you're like in your house and you're doing the dishes or whatever, and you hear the car drive by and like it backfires. Boom. You're like, what's that? And then you're like, goes back to doing dishes. But if you're in your house and you hear like a jackhammer for like an hour, eventually you're gonna go out there and be like, okay, what are they doing? What's going on? They're getting really interested. And I think it's the same with projects. Like, you can just go out with a big bang, say, here, my project. And I was going to be like, oh, that's really cool. And then back to this day. But if you've been for like a year or 2 years, like, here's the thing I do, eventually people are going to be like, this is a person who shows up, who's been delivering, is consistent, and they're worth my attention.
And doing that in terms of like, then have friends that have been art directors and they're like, we've used the same people for years, but Instagram used to be this thing like, and say, and you get bored, but so we look at Instagram, we're trying to find someone, but like sending email after email, once a month, whatever. Like, hey, this is something new that I've done. I'd still love to work with you sometime. I think it's just, reminding the people that you want to work with that they want to work with you. And so I think, maybe making a deliberate list of like, these are people I want to work with, and this is how I can reach out to them. And honestly, like sending emails honestly works pretty well. Something that like, I really would love to do the cover of this magazine. I tell them that I want to be the cover, and that has happened a few times where we're like, actually, I am in charge this month of like figuring out what's doing this cover, and let's have you do it. And mention it. Like, I'm really glad I sent that email. Don't be afraid. People are just people. That's the thing that when I was coming out of school, I was like, can't email someone from Penguin. You can email someone from Penguin, and they're just people.
Add to that, like, if you look at it through an art director's perspective, like their job is, I have to fire somebody. And if you go into it thinking with that service mindset, who do I serve? I serve art directors looking for this particular style of art. It's going to make it way easier. You only have to get the attention of 100 people instead of 100,000 people. So that's a good.
Our last question. We gotta finish.
Yeah, for that one, go make a writing and art editor, because most of the time you assume that the editors will go into the story, the words, but most of the time they actually write. Is just that the bad want to get published.
Yeah, I have learned to really trust editors and art directors for most things, but there's sort of like you've got to sort of figure out what it is you're going to fight for and what's okay, because you can't fight every title, right? And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll deliberately put in something that I know they're going to make a note on, because like something glaring, like, hey, this kid has 6 fingers, can you fix that? Because they'll be so focused on that, they won't realize that the thing I really care about is that the kid has a red shirt. I don't want to changing up in shirt, because that goes really well with my composition. So you can play those kind of games with your art directors, or character design. If you're a character designer and there's one that you really like, you might put that one in like a really cool pose, and like all the rest of them are just like this, So they're like, oh, that's the one. So you have power as the artist, but then also, when it comes to like the book cover, those sell books more than the interiors, and so I will defer to them on the little cover more often than not. Like, you just tell me what is going to sell, because you have to prove a marketing team. You can have like everybody needs to be on board, because if they're not on board, it's not going to get pushed at a publisher. And so like that's one battle like I don't have to fight, and just like, let's work together on this and get you the exact thing you want.
Like, I think she's very good.
Well, thank you guys. We'll have another one next year. Thank you for our speakers. That was great.